This is the most exciting season in the history of wilderness survival shows. Not only is the survival duration longer, but the process is also more brutal. 10 survival experts were dropped into the Arctic wilderness, with the last one standing to win $500,000. Contestants must build shelters, find food, and constantly guard against attacks from black bears, gray wolves, and moose. They are only allowed to carry 10 specific tools. Contestant Luke is from beautiful Hawaii. Apart from studying the art of glass carving, he ponders how to survive in the wilderness. Growing up in his father's outdoor school, he learned many survival skills like archery, fishing, and shelter building, and is adept at using natural resources to create various wilderness tools. He joined the competition to win the $500,000 and set an example for his son. After watching the crew leave, Luke began to explore the surroundings. Bear tracks everywhere on the beach proclaimed their dominance. Over 40,000 black bears live here. An ordinary person might be terrified, but Luke was prepared for bear hunting. He continued forward and entered an obvious tunnel without hesitation. Soon, he found a grouse, calmly adjusted his angle, aimed, and shot in one smooth sequence, killing it instantly. Seeing the grouse struggle painfully, kind-hearted Luke quickly put it out of its misery. Starting off with such a delicious meal was a great beginning. The next contestant, Lee, has half Azerbaijani blood and is the only contestant who did not gain weight for the season. His slight build seemed out of place in the harsh environment. Living in the primitive forests of Alaska, while other children were studying, he was learning hunting and setting traps. His family lives off fishing, with plenty of fish and meat daily, and hunts moose and black bears in winter, making them true wilderness natives. For others, this is a brutal survival challenge, but for Lee, it's just living in a different place. He owns a small private plane, the only link between his village and the outside world. His goal in the competition is to win the $500,000 to buy a larger plane to serve his tribe. An experienced survivor, he set up a temporary shelter framework in half a day, prepared a moss and lichen bed, and began making a lure pen to continue his family's fishing legacy. Suddenly, a noise from a distant water body made him grab a hoe and cautiously approach the river, only to find an otter playing. The distance was too great for a shot, so Lee had to return empty-handed. The morning of the second day arrived, and a sudden change in wind direction woke Luke up. It also burned several large holes in his sleeping bag. It seemed time to find a better place to camp. But first, he needed to gather some food. Reindeer Lake, with its beautiful scenery and abundant resources, was covered with wild blueberries that were free for the picking. They were sweet and rich in vitamins. As he was collecting them enthusiastically, he suddenly spotted a dark shadow in the distance. Luke determined it was a black bear foraging. He immediately followed it. Faced with this rare opportunity, Luke calmly shot an arrow, which missed the bear entirely. He quickly prepared another arrow and shot again. Watching the fleeing source of protein, Luke was frustrated to the point of swearing. He was so close to becoming the first person in wilderness survival history to hunt a bear. Regrettably, he still had to retrieve his few remaining arrows, as each contestant only had 9, and once they were gone, that was it. On the third day, Taz was woken up by a squirrel in the forest. Angrily grabbing his bow, he rushed out, and soon the sound of a bow firing echoed through the woods. The squirrel became his meal for the day. Taz grew up in rural Brazil and came to work on a farm in the United States to make a living. His tiny treehouse was his home. Growing up in a particularly hard situation, he had to rely on hunting and fishing for food, which forced him to learn many wilderness survival skills, especially tracking large game. His primary goal this time was to hunt a bear and endure until the end to win the $500,000, then bring his wife and children to live a better life. However, food storage was crucial for long-term survival. To increase his fishing success, Taz decided to make a canoe to deploy fishing nets into deeper waters. He used spruce branches for the frame and charred sticks for ribs, paying attention to every detail to perfect the canoe. He worked until late at night, and by the next day, the canoe's frame took shape. After sawing off excess material and reinforcing it with ropes, he covered sharp edges with moss and wrapped it entirely in waterproof fabric, finishing a beautiful canoe. Eager to test it, Taz found the canoe very stable. In contrast, Lee's raft was a bit rough around the edges. He used wire to join logs together, creating a basic and primitive raft. He immediately stepped on it to test it out. finding it had good buoyancy and was very stable. Without any hesitation, he paddled to the place where he last saw the otter, believing that setting a net there would catch big fish. While waiting, he didn't sit idle, but found a spot to start fishing. After battling for half an hour, he hooked a big fish, a 5 or 6 pound lake trout. While cleaning it, he unexpectedly found roe, which he promptly ate. As the day began to darken, Lee hurried to check his fishing net. From a distance, he could see the white belly of a fish on it. Pulling it out of the water, he discovered it was a barracuda. He caught 2 big fish in one day and was quite pleased with himself. He immediately cut a large piece of fish meat and started eating it. The next challenger is Judy, a 45-year-old from Wyoming, USA. While searching for a shelter site, she discovered a large patch of reindeer moss, perfect for bedding. Judy owns her own farm and has lived in the wilderness her whole life. Growing up on horseback, she has always pursued a wild and free lifestyle. She's also an adept hunter and fisher. After considering multiple factors, she found an excellent camping spot near a water source, sheltered from the wind and sun and convenient for gathering firewood and berries, yet not on the path of predatory animals, a truly strategic location. She quickly set up a temporary shelter. Although it looked simple, it was enough to provide shelter from the wind and rain. Alan, the 5th contestant this season, teaches outdoor education at a high school. Although he doesn't have special skills, his passion for archery, which started in his childhood, has won him several championships. Living in northern Canada, he has the advantage of fighting on home ground. He was making a fishing lure that resembled a small fish, crafted from high water content spruce to allow it to sink deeper. Alan's survival strategy is straightforward. Prioritize food. After making the lure, Alan started fishing and unexpectedly caught a huge fish, weighing about 30 to 40 pounds. Without a fishing rod to help with the line tension, manually fishing such a big catch was not easy. That evening, Alan enjoyed a delicious fish soup. To get enough fat, he ate the fish skin and roe clean, although the taste was somewhat unsatisfactory. After a successful first voyage, Taz kept busy weaving fishing nets. Today, the gill net set up on the shore finally caught a big one. He immediately set up a tripod on the shore to smoke and preserve the fish meat. He hung the sliced fish meat on the rack and wrapped it with a thick layer of moss. Next, he waited for the fish meat to slowly dry. With so much food, he could finally sleep well. In the morning, Taz checked the oven and found some remnants still smoldering, thinking to stoke the fire to speed up the drying process. This action ended up burning the fish meat. By the time he fetched water from the lake to extinguish the fire, the fish had turned to charcoal, and the newly acquired food was lost. The 6th contestant, Anne, is 56 years old. Upon landing, she experienced seasickness and felt disoriented. After calming down, she began searching for a campsite to build her shelter. Anne is a survival expert and an organic farmer, and she is also a quick archer. Despite her age, her extensive survival experience is evident. She knows how to waterproof her outer layer with birch oil, sun-dry meats, and identify various plants. Her farming has not been profitable over the years, so she hopes to win the prize money to expand her farm. After setting up her bed, Anne took her bow and arrows and started scouting the area. She found some cranberries and hedgehog mushrooms nearby and also spotted bear droppings. As the weather grew colder and bears needed to eat before hibernating, Anne knew she needed to hunt a bear to win the competition. That evening, Anne cooked a large pot of mushrooms to fuel up for the next day's bear hunt. The next female contestant, Melanie, lives in the mountains with her fiancé, surrounded by chickens, ducks, and dogs. Her life is stable, and she has developed an interest in wilderness survival, honing various skills such as fishing, hunting, and shelter building. She is now a partner at a survival school. Her goal is clear: to focus and quickly build a permanent shelter. Given her height of 1.8 meters, her shelter needs to be larger. By the end of the day, her shelter was mostly complete. Next, she filled the gaps with moss, layering moss and logs for better insulation and stability. By the 6th day, flocks of geese flying south signaled the approaching winter, making building a warm shelter a priority. With plenty of rocks available, Anne decided to build a semi-subterranean shelter for better insulation. She tirelessly dug down, burning a lot of calories. As light rain began to fall, Anne simply put on a raincoat and continued working. She used logs for the structure and moss to fill the gaps. Along the way, she found fresh deer droppings, which excited her as securing a deer could clinch her victory. Meanwhile, Judy was also busy building her shelter, surviving on blueberries and reindeer moss. Thinking of the better heat retention of logs, she decided to build a cabin. However, the intense labor caused blisters on her hands. She applied spruce resin for its anti-inflammatory and antibacterial properties, which also promoted wound healing. After quick treatment, she resumed her work to finish the cabin before winter. On the 7th day of the survival challenge, Cade, having completed his shelter, started his deer hunting plan. He took his bow and arrows and searched along the way, quickly finding moose tracks. Ahead, he spotted gnawed leaves and marks on tree trunks from antlers rubbing against them. With a professional hunter's keen sense, Cade sensed the moose was nearby. He quickly set up his bow and arrows, tore off a piece of bark, rolled it into a horn, and mimicked a moose mating call. The sound was very convincing. Soon, rustling sounds came from the woods. Cade immediately grabbed his bow and rushed forward. He saw antlers. It was a North American caribou, a rare protected species locally. Killing it by mistake could mean a severe punishment. Cade could only watch as the $500,000 prize slipped away. With no deer meat to stave off hunger, Cade had to settle for collecting blueberries. As a professional hunting guide, Cade spends much of the year in the deep mountains, away from his family. As he grows older, he tires of this nomadic life and wants to establish a mounted archery camp to settle down. However, this requires winning the $500,000 prize. He is the only contestant who didn't gain weight before the season, believing hunting and fishing skills are key to long-term survival here. To prove his point, Cade shot down a grouse with a headshot. Sitting by the campfire at night, eating delicious berry-stewed grouse, his confidence in winning increased. Next up is White, a true native Canadian who lives year-round in the cold northern forests, relying solely on hunted meat. He is versatile, adept at hunting on land and fishing at sea, and skilled in butchering and storing. Having hunted with his father since childhood, he has killed countless bears and deer. Competing on home ground, he is more confident in winning the race. White's survival strategy is clear. Fish and berries sustain life, but hunting large animals is key to winning. He set up a woven spike net by the lake, creating an all-day automatic fishing device, freeing him up to hunt. The last contestant, Mickey, has been busy building a shelter, eating only 6 handfuls of berries. Now hungry, he begins to hunt in this unfamiliar area. A carpenter, he excels at creating useful tools from nature, proud of his jungle toilet. From a young age, Mickey learned tracking, hunting, and fishing, mastering wilderness survival skills. He and his beautiful wife work hard, raising 5 sons. He entered the contest for his son with autism, hoping to win the prize for the best medical care. Lost and wandering in the forest without a compass, Mickey soon showed signs of dehydration. Just when I thought he was doomed, he was thrilled to find his campsite ahead. White, returning empty-handed from his hunting trip, pinned his hopes on his automatic fishing device. From a distance, he spotted a large fish hanging from it and let out an ecstatic, almost inhuman cry. The fish, over 1 meter long, would feed him for a good while. White began by gutting it and then roasting it over the fire, thoroughly enjoying his meal. Over the past week, Alan only caught fish on the first day and recently had been surviving on berries and mushrooms. Building a shelter consumed a lot of energy, and he felt his body's resources dwindling. Searching for food could delay the shelter's progress, so he set traps in the forest, hoping for some unwitting protein to walk in. He focused on finishing the shelter, and once the last piece of reindeer moss was in place, his cozy cabin was complete. Without much time to celebrate, Alan hurried to check his traps but heard growling from afar. Approaching, he discovered a fox caught in one, furiously digging and glaring at him. It was a rare protected animal, clearly furious at being trapped. Alan quickly moved to release it, but the fox's aggressive reactions forced him to cover it with his jacket and cut the trap to free it. Feeling compassion, Alan destroyed all his traps, deciding to rely on fishing for food in the future. The scene shifts to Mickey, whose feet were emitting white smoke. Initially thought to be from the cold, he revealed it was actually his athlete's foot, embarrassingly potent enough to be sensed through the screen. Perhaps driven by the pungent smell, he grabbed his bow and arrows and headed out, following the sound of flapping wings. He soon found a grouse. To avoid startling it, he held his breath and crept closer. then easily shot it down with his bow. Returning to camp with his prize, Mickey began plucking and cooking the bird, enjoying his first wild meal since arriving. Meanwhile, Cade, who was hunting in the wild, spotted a group of wild ducks in a lake. Unfortunately, they were out of shooting range. Cade had to look for other prey and followed an animal trail. However, he realized he had lost his quiver and hurried back to look for it, but found nothing. To date, he has caught 11 fish, smoked some for jerky to ensure daily energy intake, but Luke knows that this amount of food won't win him the $500,000 prize. Therefore, he collects blueberries daily, cooks them, and dries them into fruit leather for storage. Now, with enough food, he prioritizes building a permanent shelter on a wind-shielded sunny slope. He digs with a trenching shovel, uses the excavated soil for walls, and builds a frame with logs, covered with moss and a waterproof sheet for insulation. Cade, who lost his quiver, was so upset he almost quit the competition. After a few days, he recovered and set some traps in the woods, but caught nothing. As a professional hunter, Cade refused to give up hunting and began making his own arrows. He smoothed branches with a knife, stabilized the center of gravity with wire at the top, and tied grouse feathers at the tail with fishing line for stability. He decorated the arrows with charcoal. The homemade arrows were complete, and he tested one by shooting it at a wooden target tied to a tree. The arrow hit its mark, helping him overcome the embarrassment of losing his arrows. By the 15th day, Lee had been busy building a shelter, mostly eating berries and concocting a purple health soup from birch bark and berries. Despite its bitter taste, it had anti-inflammatory properties. He hadn't caught any fish recently, though he expected to today. He continued working, using large trees to build a sturdy hunting cabin for bear hunting, a skill taught by his father. After days of hard work, his hunting cabin took shape. Despite unsuccessful fishing trips, he worked on an empty stomach, his efficiency decreasing. To withstand temperatures below 50 degrees, he persevered, covering the roof with thick moss and a waterproof sheet, and installing a small door. That night, Lee stayed in the cabin, but hunger and the wind outside kept him awake. On the third day, he got up early to go fishing but failed to catch anything even after trying for a long time. Even the highly anticipated fishing net came up empty. Faced with his distorted, hungry reflection, Lee could no longer bear it. He pulled out his phone and dialed the number, announcing, "This is Lee, I am officially clocking out." With that, Lee ended his participation on day 18, becoming the first to withdraw. Suddenly announcing his withdrawal, Wyatt found several otters swimming at the lake, indicating a rich fish presence nearby. Hungry, he swiftly set up a gill net, then took out his secret weapon, ready for a big catch. He used spruce logs and bright yellow trap lines as bait, the vivid colors contrasting with the surroundings to attract fish from afar. Despite various attempts today, his luck seemed off. Reluctantly, he changed fishing spots, and unexpectedly, the new spot was fruitful. With a cast, Wyatt felt a tug and hauled in a big fish. This catch would feed him for 3 days. He placed the fish in a nearby live pool and continued fishing while the iron was hot, catching another fish, sustaining him for a week. Wyatt was thrilled. But as dusk fell, he was too lazy to process the fish and decided to keep them in the pool, spending a restless night. The next morning, Wyatt rushed to the fish pool, only to be stunned as all the fish had disappeared. For Anne, obtaining food was much harder than for the younger contestants. Just building a shelter had exhausted a lot of her energy. Today, she finally set aside her work to go hunting and quickly spotted grouse tracks. With a sly smile, she raised her bow and hit her target. Just as she was about to fire, she heard a noise by the lake. Anne quickly grabbed her bow and arrow and followed the sound, only to find a moose, unfortunately out of shooting range. The scene shifts to Cade. After successfully testing an arrow, he began mass-producing them. Suddenly, he heard the sound of a grouse flapping its wings. Startled, he quickly grabbed his bow and arrow and chased after it. This game came just in time to test his new arrow. Before he knew it, the grouse was in hand. Cade then started building a stove. He scraped moss off stones and built a pit. Once the fire was lit, he could eat. The chicken soup aroma filled the air, satisfying his long, hungry stomach. After eating, Cade went to the river to drink some water. During that short time, his stove caught fire. He hurriedly used a bucket to fetch water and extinguish the fire. In contrast, Alan has been the most stable contestant so far. Let's visit his house. The outer layer is covered with moss and spruce, and the floor is lined with pine branches. He even made a stone fire pit and installed a skylight in the roof. After securing his shelter, he focused on food. He has been fishing with a line, reaping a rich harvest almost daily. Today was no exception. He quickly dragged a big fish ashore, securing a week's worth of meals. On day 19 of the competition, Anne tried to mimic the call of a moose. Since eating the grouse, she had not cooked again. Unfortunately, no moose responded. Sitting on a stump, she felt her heart racing and her body weakening. At 56, and with the strain of the past days, she was overwhelmed. Back at the shelter, she drank some hot water but felt ill. After a few minutes, she resolved to call it quits. Thus, Anne withdrew from the competition. Despite her strong will, physical reasons forced her to give up. On day 18, after consuming several fish jerky, Luke completed his wilderness mansion. To compensate for the food lost over the days, he immediately went to the lake to fish. Soon he felt movement on the hook and rhythmically reeled in the line, easily pulling up a large lake fish. With this line, he had already caught 16 fish, hanging most outside his shelter, with 3 still unprocessed by the shore. To speed up the smoking process, he carved a hole in the wall, supported by rocks on both sides and the top, not only for cooking fish, but also for heating. As night fell and he sat in his mansion eating the small dried fish, he soon felt unwell, starting to vomit and experience diarrhea. The next day, Cade continued his routine patrol and hunting. Despite eating many grouse, he was still losing weight, highlighting the difficulties of surviving in the wild. Upon seeing blueberries, he couldn't move and began frantically devouring them on the spot. Moving forward, he was attracted by a fresh, warm pile of bear droppings, indicating a black bear was nearby. Excited, Cade vowed to hunt it to advance to the final round. Knowing his wooden arrows would be insufficient, he returned to camp to start crafting new ones, focusing on the arrowheads which he wrapped with scavenged metal. After repeatedly heating and sharpening them to penetrate bear fur and heat-treating the shaft to remove moisture and increase hardness, he added tail feathers to stabilize the arrow. The powerful arrow was now ready, and Cade declared the start of his bear hunting mode. Meanwhile, White spotted a mink fishing in a pool, suspecting it had stolen his fish. Despite his frustration, he couldn't harm the protected animal. White then caught a large fish and, not taking any chances, quickly cleaned it and placed it on the grill. By the 20th day, Luke had endured a terrible night. He tried to sleep on a grassy area but suffered severe stomach issues, suspecting the water was contaminated. Considering continuing might worsen his health, he reached for his phone to call for evacuation. Just as he was about to make the call, he saw a black bear. Grabbing his bow and arrows, he chased and shot at it, but missed due to the distance. Calming down, he realized it was a mother bear with her cub foraging. This sighting allowed him to peacefully withdraw from the competition. Soon, a speedboat approached, creating a wake on the water. Facing the camera, Luke was visibly relieved, but choked up momentarily. Despite having a warm shelter and ample food, he had to leave due to health reasons, which was hard to accept. Silently packing his bags, Luke left, filled with regret. On the 19th day of the survival challenge, Taz got up and tidied his hair before cooking himself a big fish meal. After eating, he happily checked his gill net and saw a large fish from afar. Excited, he quickly stripped off his clothes to retrieve it. Carrying the big fish, he joyfully returned to camp to slice and smoke it for preservation. While he was busy, an uninvited guest silently crept in. By day 21, Judy, who had been busy building a shelter, finally finished just before it started to snow. The cabin, built with quality materials and fine craftsmanship, had all its gaps filled with moss. She fetched some fresh water from the lake and slowly boiled it on the stove, enjoying the smoky ambiance. As the temperature rose and the snow began to melt, Judy went out to bring back some logs to make a wooden door for the cabin, completing the final step in the building process. Once installed, the indoor temperature increased significantly. With winter and heavy snow approaching, everything would become wet. Melanie felt it necessary to build a shelter for storing food and firewood. She used 4 trees at the shelter's entrance, reinforcing the base with some wooden sticks, then built up 3 walls with logs and moss. The roof was neatly covered with short logs and moss to prevent rain and snow. From the start, Melanie had been surviving on berries and bark. Though she attempted fishing, all efforts had failed until today, when she unexpectedly caught a fish, which then escaped, taking her hook with it. Fortunately, she had plenty of spare hooks, creatively stored in a unique container she hadn't thought of earlier. Ingeniously, she tore off her pink underwear to use as bait, which surprisingly worked well. She caught a fish steadily this time and cooked it over a large fire at camp, providing protein many times that of beef. Earlier, Taz had set many traps in the forest. Now was the time to check them. Seeing many animal tracks along the way, he expected a good haul. Indeed, he found a squirrel in one of the traps, a welcome change from fish. He quickly cleaned it by the water, but when he returned to the shelter, he found the smoked fish had been stolen. Grabbing his bow and arrows, he followed the tracks but couldn't find the culprit. He had to think of another way to protect his food. Removing tree bark effectively prevented animals from climbing. He then crafted a wooden box using wire and sticks, and with the help of a ladder, placed it 4 meters high in a tree. The height made it difficult even for him to access, ensuring the food was safe from theft. By day 22, as the weather grew colder, obtaining food became increasingly difficult. Judy, already having lost 25 kilograms, was now boiling bark out of desperation. Her body was craving protein. She had relied on berries while building the shelter, thinking she would start hunting once it was finished. However, her high standards for the shelter led her to keep filling gaps with moss. Missing her family too much, Judy decided to quit the competition. On day 20 of the survival challenge, Cade found his belt had loosened again. He cut off the excess and threw it into the pot with some mushrooms, hoping to extract some oils to replenish his body. He tried eating a piece but found it hard to swallow, so he got up to look for other food. Due to prolonged malnutrition, he was dizzy and almost fell, which frightened him into squatting down and stuffing blueberries into his mouth to regain energy before continuing on his way. Soon, he found bear feces and a nearby animal trail. To wait for the bear, he started collecting branches to conceal himself. Having relied on berries, his body was desperately craving protein. After waiting a while without seeing any bears, he impatiently searched for other prey. He soon heard a squirrel and slowly approached the target. He shot an arrow, but it hit a tree. He needed to retrieve it. So after eating some blueberries for energy, Cade climbed the tree to catch the squirrel. Unfortunately, he was left with a scratch from the squirrel, posing a risk of infection. As the weather grew colder, finding food became even more difficult. Alan's gill net caught nothing again, so he went back to fishing. He immediately got a bite, and, though it was just a small fish, he soon caught many more. On day 21, as snowflakes fell from the sky, Mickey was glad he had prepared in advance. He had been hunting partridges to obtain fat and now targeted nearby mice, annoyed by them nibbling his ears at night. He sharpened a few sticks, interlocked them to form a stable structure, and used a lever principle to support a stone slab, placing a mushroom as bait to hopefully catch a mouse to taste. Surprisingly, the trap worked. Mickey savored the hard-earned food and even turned the mouse skin into an art piece. Meanwhile, White had already successfully caught 6 big fish. Today, he joyously kissed another fish he caught, but his happiness lasted only seconds before the hook was lost forever, leaving White heartbroken. Each contestant has only 4 anchors. Losing one is a disaster. They can now only make new ones from other materials. After some effort, the new hook, named Golden Fury, is completed. To prevent another loss, it's reinforced with a metal leader to stop big fish from taking it. However, things don't always go as planned. When he's ready to conquer the waters again, the new Golden Fury is lost. Wyatt is devastated. Meanwhile, Cade's bear hunting is going slowly. He's been surviving on mushrooms, getting weaker each day. Still, he continues hunting, believing he will find a bear. He finds some feces with fresh blueberries and eats them, adhering to his principle of not wasting food. He faints from low blood sugar and wakes up an hour later, crying from the overwhelming desire to win. Even after losing an arrow, he doesn't give up due to his strong will. Unfortunately, he must leave the competition for health reasons, leaving with deep regret after 24 days. 5 contestants remain. Taz checks his food store and finds his chicken meat infested with maggots, suspecting his smoking technique was insufficient. Seeing the wriggling proteins, he's actually thrilled. He covers his storage and heads to the lake, finding his gill net empty again as fish move to deeper waters due to the cold. Hunting seems more reliable. Taz picks up his bow and arrows and mimics the sound of a mating stag using birch bark to attract a buck. Instead, he startles a partridge in a tree, quickly shoots, and misses. He loses 2 arrows. Contestants can carry up to 9 arrows, and each lost arrow decreases his chance of winning by 10%. Desperately searching, he finally finds them, and even the fleeing partridge. Calmly pulling his bow, he successfully hunts the partridge, moved to tears by his catch. Luck continues as he finds another on his way back, capturing it as well. On the other hand, White, despite losing 2 baits, maintains his quality of life. He catches a large fish weighing around 5 or 6 pounds, securing a week's meals. Sadly, the fish breaks through the net, and at this critical time for stocking food, White cannot afford any accidents. He immediately starts making a new net back at camp. Day 26 quickly arrived. Melanie, who didn't appear much on camera, has been surviving on grass. To cook moss better, she built a simple kitchen. Moss is a scarce dietary fiber, but eating too much can cause diarrhea and stomach cramps. The best solution is to repeatedly boil it to reduce its acidity. After finishing, she started walking nearby, hoping to find mushrooms and berries. After walking 2 kilometers, she found blueberries and began to pick and eat them. For now, she might survive on wild fruits and moss, but once the heavy snow falls and plants wither, where will Melanie go? Mickey faces the same dilemma. Lacking protein, his tryptophan levels dropped, causing severe insomnia. He spends nights sharpening knives to pass the time, making them so sharp they easily shave off hair. Not wanting to suffer from insomnia any longer, he heads to the mountains to hunt at dawn. After finding nothing, he picks berries to survive, quickly collecting a full bag. On the way back, he discovers a wooden box, perfect for making a door at home. He uses 2 pine logs for the frame, nails the planks, and saws off the excess. His triangular door is completed. As plants yellow and winter approaches, White stays busy stacking firewood on days he doesn't fish. He believes staying warm is as crucial as food. After working, he checks his gill net, which is 1 meter long and weighs over 30 kilograms. Smoking is undoubtedly the best option for longer preservation of fish meat. Day 27 quickly arrived. Alan was fishing by the lake again. With his fishing line, he has already caught over 20 fish. After eating and drinking, he starts building a smoking room. Only by storing excess meat can he last till the end. After laying the last piece of moss, he returns to fish by the lake. He immediately catches a big fish and hurriedly drags it ashore. In his haste, the reel falls into the water. Decisively, he strips to retrieve it. Fortunately, the reel hadn't completely sunk, allowing him to recover it. After returning to camp, he quickly began smoking the fish. Once he arranged the sliced fish, he sought the right kind of firewood. Only low-fat birch and willow can produce healthy, delicious smoked fish. Watching the rich fish meat slowly change color, Taz, boosted by 2 partridges, put the finishing touches on his shelter. Just as he finished, the weather suddenly changed, forcing him to abandon his hunting plans and stay indoors for self-entertainment. Faced with the sudden weather change, everyone clearly lacked good coping strategies. Those with stored food ate meat at home, while those without relied on passive skills to endure. Mickey, who had been drinking water for several days, couldn't bear the hunger anymore and took his bow and arrows back into the mountains. Surprisingly, he soon encountered a partridge. Silently drawing his bow, he shot an arrow, and a second later, a dark shadow fell from the sky. Mickey quickly moved forward to pick up his trophy. On day 30, a loud noise woke Melanie. After quickly checking outside, she discovered her storage room had collapsed, containing her winter firewood. After a quick cleanup, she returned to the shelter to continue enjoying a berry feast. But as she ate, she suddenly lost control and burst into tears, overwhelmed by her longing for her boyfriend. Unable to fish or hunt, how much longer could Melanie endure? Once the weather slightly improved, Alan eagerly checked on the smoked fish, relieved to find everything normal. He then took out paracord and spruce wood, and after some simple processing, had a new lure. Casting it several times by the lake, he soon had a big fish on the hook. Alan quickly reeled it in, but just as it was about to reach the shore, it got off the hook. However, as the season's fishing king, Alan didn't give up. He continued to try and kept losing the hook. After repeated disappointments, he finally gave up. White had already stored a lot of fish meat but knew that to win the $500,000 his current supplies weren't enough. So, he planned to hunt a large animal before the harsh winter arrived. However, the previous day's violent storms had severely damaged his gill net. Not wanting his fishing efforts to be in vain, he quickly repaired the net. Taking the mended net to the lake, he placed it where he had caught a big fish last time, hoping to catch a 30-pound lake trout. An accident had occurred 7 days earlier. A piece of firewood had pierced his arm, leaving a deep, still bleeding wound likely infected. But he refused to give up, boiling spruce water daily for disinfection, praying it wouldn't force him to withdraw from the competition. A few days later, his arm had fully healed. Without hesitation, he grabbed his new bait and went back to his usual spot to fish. Within minutes, he had a bite and quickly reeled in a large fish weighing about 5 or 6 kilograms, securing a week's worth of food. Riding his success, he cast his line again, but his joy turned to sorrow as he watched his last bait fly away. Without bait, he could no longer fish. However, he quickly recovered, took his bow and arrows, and headed into the forest to try his luck. Soon, he encountered game. Without any hesitation, he drew his bow and shot an arrow. A grouse fell in the distance. As White marveled at his fortune, he heard a noise nearby and quickly released another arrow, adding a small squirrel to his catch. His luck didn't end there. When he checked his gill net at the lake, he found another big fish. This turn of events maximized the show's impact. Unless something unexpected happened, White was likely to be this season's champion. Day 31 arrived, and Alan woke up to find his face had sunken in further. Since the start of the contest, he had lost 33 kilograms, just a step away from being forced to withdraw. His only hope was his gill net. Approaching it, he indeed found something. A greedy duck entangled in the net. But since this method of hunting didn't comply with the show's rules, Alan reluctantly chose to release the duck. Before he could repair the net, he tried fishing, but the rough conditions were not ideal. As the weather grew colder, the fish had moved to deeper waters. Despite trying a few casts, he ended up seeing not even a glimpse of a fish. Taz, not wanting to be awakened by the cold night wind again, decided to install a large door on his shelter. He chopped several logs with an axe, measured the door frame, and used wire to tie the frame together. He chose several even branches, stripped the bark, arranged them neatly, and secured everything with nails to create a refined door. Not wanting to waste the remaining materials, he finished crafting a chair and tested it, uttering a comfortable grunt. After all this work, he felt hungry. With high hopes, he opened his storage box, but the sight that greeted him nearly made him vomit. The grouse he had been reluctant to eat was crawling with disgusting maggots. Taz didn't want to waste the food, but he couldn't bring himself to eat it as it was. Resolved, he simply cleaned off the surface maggots and boiled the grouse vigorously. On day 32 of the survival challenge, Melanie had lost 30 kg. Since the start, she had been unable to catch fish or hunt game, surviving only on berries and tree bark. Now she had consumed all the food around her camp and had to search farther away. Due to prolonged malnutrition, her legs felt as heavy as if they were filled with lead, and she nearly collapsed upon reaching her destination. However, she collected a full bag of berries, which somewhat consoled her injured heart. Meanwhile, across the lake, Alan was repairing his damaged gill net, but his mood worsened as a storm approached. Thinking it might get damaged again, he decided to try his luck in the forest, following moose tracks to the lake, where he planned to ambush the moose and fish. Soon, there was movement on his fishing line, but his excitement caused the fish to unhook. After casting again, the fish fell off as he pulled it ashore, watching big fish escape repeatedly. Even strong Alan eventually broke down. As the sun set without any sign of the moose, he packed up and headed back. Unlike the other contestants, Mickey, besides capturing protein sources, never wasted a single calorie. He spent his free time crafting, like carving a top for his son, which made him miss home even more. To ease his homesickness, Mickey decided to go out again, hoping to find some protein. After a fruitless search, he was about to return home when he heard chirping in the forest. Quickly grabbing his bow and arrow, he targeted and shot, dropping a dark shadow. He efficiently cleaned his catch by the lake and roasted it without any seasonings. Mickey enjoyed his meal thoroughly, not sparing even the brains. Yesterday, Taz had risked eating a maggot-infested grouse, but fortunately felt no ill effects today. However, his stored food hung by the door had been stolen. With no choice, he pinned his hopes on the gill net, but the strong wind had tangled it up, leaving him with no catch and a big repair job. For now, he had to rely on hunting. He made traps from wire and set many in the forest, hoping to catch some squirrels to improve his diet. As day 34 arrived, he took his fishing hook and started fishing again. Learning from his previous experience with escaping fish, he deliberately enlarged the hook's gap, hoping for a successful catch this time. After countless attempts, as darkness approached, the long-awaited movement finally came from the fishing line. He quickly reeled in and swiftly retrieved his catch, successfully securing a small lake trout without it escaping. Without resting, Alan pursued further success, and soon another fish bit. Upon dragging it to shore, he discovered it was an enormous barracuda. Excited, Alan exerted a strong pull, but tragically, the line snapped, and the lure disappeared with it. Alan reflected that it was the biggest barracuda he had ever seen. On day 36 of the survival challenge, Taz, equipped with homemade gear, began his fishing early by the lake. He cast his line dozens of times until the sun began to rise, and finally, there was movement on his hook. He quickly set the hook and reeled in the line, landing a modest-sized lakefish. Seeing the feeding window for the fish, Taz decided to capitalize on his success and catch a few more. Perhaps due to good luck or hard work, he soon caught a barracuda weighing 5 or 6 pounds. Satisfied, Taz returned to camp with his prizes, skillfully gutted and cleaned them, putting the guts and fish heads in a pot to boil for soup while smoking the meat on a rack. Minutes later, the delicious fish soup was ready. Just as Taz was about to enjoy his meal, a strange noise came from the woods. He grabbed his bow and arrow and rushed out. Following a flurry of bow drawing and shooting, he returned with a mink in hand, the very creature that had stolen his fish twice. He quickly skinned it and cleaned the insides, then cooked it over a high fire until the skin split and the meat was tender. With winter's arrival, obtaining food became increasingly difficult. Forced by circumstances, Mickey began to economize meticulously. He ground leftover bones into powder, mixed them with berries, and mashed the mixture into a paste to make a nutritious Mexican meatloaf. Although the taste might not be perfect, it could at least sustain him for 2 more days. After finishing, he took his bow and arrow and went out for his daily hunt. Seeing berries, he couldn't resist collecting them fervently, planning to process them into fruit leather to prevent spoilage. He first crushed them in an iron pot, then wrapped and squeezed out the moisture with a sock. He placed the fruit pulp on the stove to roast. 10 minutes later, the wilderness fruit leather was ready. Meanwhile, Wyatt faced a new problem. His injured arm oozed white fluid again, undoubtedly infected. However, he ignored it, considering a bandage sufficient treatment. For him, fishing was the priority, needing to stock up on food before the snowfall. But the cold weather soon froze his hands. After half a day's effort without any catch, day 37 arrived, a windy day. To solve the difficulty of starting a fire, Melanie planned to fix up the outdoor kitchen. She increased the height of the walls and filled the gaps with decaying birch bark. After these tasks, she boiled herself a pot of water, drinking it voraciously. Surviving on water daily, she worried about her body's ability to endure. On day 37 of the survival challenge, Mickey, constantly disturbed by rats, couldn't sleep. He set traps indoors and caught several rats. After skinning and plucking, the aroma of grilled meat instantly spread far and wide. Alan's house also had rats. His wife's handmade sweater had a big hole chewed in it. Alan quickly found 2 stones, propped them up with branches to make a 4-shaped trap, determined to catch the entire Jerry family. As he finished and was about to continue sleeping, he suddenly felt something crawl over him. In a moment of panic, he swung his hand in a swift motion. Turning on the light, he saw a Jerry dead on the spot. Now wide awake, Alan took out his newly improved lure, confident it could catch even the biggest fish. However, actual attempts were less successful, as repeated casts attracted no bites. Just as Alan was about to give up and leave, a sudden noise came from the bushes behind him. He quietly took up his bow and arrow and soon spotted his target. Holding his breath, he drew a full bow. It was his first time hitting a grouse. After such a long struggle, he was finally able to change his diet, smiling so wide his face could trap mosquitoes. Since Taz had a food reserve, he now walked with a swagger. Today, he planned to check the traps he had set earlier and take a hike, hoping for a chance encounter with a moose. Unfortunately, the squirrel trap was empty. As he continued deeper into the swamp, the wind picked up, making it impossible to hear any prey. Reluctantly, he had to return. To address his loneliness, Taz showcased his impressive craft skills by carving a beautiful ukulele. Melanie, always seen collecting, never seemed to eat properly. Today she gathered a lot of moss and mushrooms, stir-frying them to evaporate the moisture, then grinding them into powder and boiling it to make a delicious wilderness meal. For 38 days, this has been her diet, and her resilience is truly admirable. On day 39, Taz played and sang at the campsite early in the morning, confidently displaying his talents. He then launched his long-unused canoe into the deep waters, a boat he built early in the competition, believing it to be his key to victory. Once at the lake's center, he started fishing, expecting a good catch as the cold had driven the fish to deeper waters. Unfortunately, reality was harsh, and after a fruitless morning, he returned to shore as the cold worsened. With the snow covering the ground, food became even harder to find. While others collected the last of the berries, Taz embarked on a hunting trip, hoping to catch a large animal. This unrestrained physical exertion eventually took a toll on him. By the time he returned to camp, his movements were noticeably slower. Although Taz never lacked food, he had lost 52 kilograms. Understanding his body's limits, he chose to withdraw from the competition. Taz had a smooth journey, but his frail body could no longer bear the burden. Hopefully, he can recover and return to the competition. On day 42, a blizzard hit Reindeer Lake, arriving just as the anticipated hunting season began. Before setting out and concerned about possible toxins, he tasted a piece of the recently collected mushrooms. After wandering the forest, he found grouse tracks and followed them to a moving shadow in the trees. Without hesitation, White shot an arrow, bringing the grouse down. Approaching to retrieve it, he noticed more tracks on a nearby stump and discovered another grouse perched there. With no courtesy, he shot a full arrow. Seeing the struggling grouse, White felt a pang of remorse and quickly ended its suffering. Now, he had ingredients for chicken and mushroom stew. Without further ado, he sped back to camp to start plucking the feathers. White is not greedy. He plans to eat one grouse and save the other. He smokes the prepared one over the fire while cleaning the other, which he will toss into a pot for a hearty stew. The camera shifts to Alan, who, seeing the snowy expanse outside, is thrilled. He rushes back to camp to make more arrows. He has lost 3 arrows so far and is determined to protect the remaining 6 by replacing their tips with wood. This weakens their penetration but is still effective for small game. Equipped and stepping outside, he views the calm lake but quickly decides to check his fishing net, which has yet to catch a fish. Disappointed again, he casts a line and soon catches fish after fish, frustratingly losing each one. Annoyed, Alan heads into the forest, hoping to catch a grouse, just like Mickey, who thought hunting would be easier after the heavy snowfall, but found nothing. Mickey intended to conserve energy by resting, but restless thoughts plagued him. To clear his mind, he builds a campfire by the lake, throws in some nails, and hammers them into shape after heating. After quenching the reshaped nails in cold water, he crafts a beautiful gift for his son, using only hemp rope for decoration. Meanwhile, Melanie, who has been surviving on grass, also has her moment of triumph. She catches a mouse in her trap, her second source of protein in over 40 days. She quickly cleans it, takes Flint to her outdoor kitchen, and cooks it with moss over a fierce fire. After eating the almost fully cooked meal, she feels instantly energized and loudly declares her command over the competition. As for White, since hunting the grouse, he has been hibernating at home, only moving when the firewood for heating runs low. Maintaining a 24-hour fire requires at least 30 logs a day, which is physically taxing, especially on an empty stomach. Busy with work, his previously injured right arm starts hurting again. He stops, returns to camp holding the firewood, rolls up his sleeve, and sees the swollen area around the wound. Considering the risk of infection, White decides to handle it immediately. Gritting his teeth, He uses pliers to pull out a splinter. The pain nearly knocks him out, but the removal of the splinter miraculously heals the abscess. Day 43 has arrived. Today is Alan's 52nd birthday. Despite being alone in the wilderness, he maintains a sense of ceremony. He generously takes out 3 pieces of smoked fish and makes a sandwich cake to celebrate. Usually, he only eats half a slice each day, but today, he indulgently cooks a whole piece. Half an hour later, a delicious birthday feast is ready. Next, it's time to enjoy the tasty meal. After eating, Alan checks his fishing net. Although it has been over 40 days without any catch, he still hopes for a surprise today. As the net is slowly pulled out of the water, seeing the large fish hanging on it, Alan excitedly babbles incoherently. This is the biggest fish he has caught in the competition, and also a birthday gift from heaven. After cleaning the big fish, night has fallen. Looking at the beautiful aurora in the sky, he suddenly has a bold idea and sets off a bear flare. Meanwhile, since Melanie ate mouse meat, her inner desires have been fully ignited. Today, she even considers fishing in the lake, perhaps due to a lack of real experience from her vegetarian diet. Or maybe there just aren't any fish in the stream. She tries hard for half a day, but brings back no catch, dejectedly returning to her shelter. Feeling defeated, she cries and makes a satellite phone call. Facing the camera of the crew, this woman who has survived 43 days on grass finally shows a brilliant smile again. By day 45, although he eats fish every day, half a fish is not enough to sustain him. Visibly, he has developed 8 abs. Seeing that the day is sunny, neither cold nor hot, he quickly heads to the lake to stock up. Since winter began, he hasn't caught any fish, and his reserves are nearly depleted. If he doesn't catch anything, he'll have to eat less. Just when he thinks today might be another fruitless day, he hurriedly drags it ashore, catching a 9.5-pound big fish, securing 3 days' worth of meals. But when he cuts open the fish's belly, he sees these white noodles. No doubt, the fish has a tapeworm infection. To eat or not to eat, Alan faces a dilemma. After much hesitation, he decides to risk it. He quickly cuts the trout in half, saving some in the smoker and cooking the rest over high heat in an iron pot. Half an hour later, a delicious meal is ready, and Alan apprehensively begins to eat. Enjoying such perfect weather for the outdoors, White takes his gear and enters the forest. Tired of eating fish every day, he needs some protein for a change of taste. Soon he crosses the forest to the lake, seeing a fish on the net from a distance. Eagerly, he sets down his gear and starts to retrieve it. After an indescribable struggle, he pulls up a 9-pound big white fish. Carrying the big fish back to shore, he scrapes off the scales, cleans out the innards, and uses a small knife to cut it into pieces. Survival challenge. Day 46. Reindeer Island is completely covered in snow. Mickey heads out with a bow and arrows to hunt. He thought hunting would be easier after the snow, but he only found a trail of mouse tracks. The biting cold at his feet warned him of potential frostbite, forcing him to abandon the hunt and return to the shelter. So far, Mickey has lost over 60 pounds. The rapid burning of fat leaves him physically and mentally exhausted, but he pushes himself to continue for the prize money to treat his son's illness. He makes a simple trap with sticks and stones, hoping to catch a few mice to regain some strength. Elsewhere, Alan complains about an unscrupulous merchant. His sleeping bag, supposed to withstand -40 degrees, almost froze him last night. However, the good news is after eating fish with viruses, he feels no discomfort. Seeing the calm lake, he immediately rushes to the shore with his fishing gear. In the freezing cold, it's easy to lose feeling in one's hands, which could lead to accidents. Luckily, he reacts quickly and grabs the fishing line to avoid loss. After this ordeal, Alan loses the desire to continue fishing. By day 47, several mice have been trapped. Though small and not very meaty, they are a lifesaver for Mickey. He carefully skins the mice, fills them with moss and weeds, and meticulously sews them up with wire. A genuine leather mouse toy is created, the 4th birthday gift for his son since arriving. After finishing, the roasted mouse meat is ready, and Mickey eagerly begins to eat. Though the meat is indeed scant, the partridge killed 2 days ago and the 9-pound fish caught today are still not enough for White to feel confident in winning. He decides he needs a bigger catch. After searching the jungle for 3 hours without seeing any animals, he pins his hopes on his gill net, anticipating a big fish today. His hopeful mood pays off as he catches a 30-pound barracuda. To conserve energy, Mickey has been staying indoors doing crafts for 2 days, only venturing out when extremely hungry. He decides to try eating reindeer moss, pretending it's sauerkraut. Though edible, improper handling can cause stomach cramps, which has led many contestants to withdraw in the past. Yesterday's toilet paper, today's brunch. Mickey reluctantly tries a bite and finds it not as bad as expected. He cooks another pot to keep for dinner. While waiting, he starts another craft project, a garlic day present for his wife to improve her cooking skills. While busy, he suddenly sees a mink passing by. Local regulations prohibit trapping, but allow shooting with arrows. Mickey does not hesitate to pursue this protein gift. As he prepares to shoot, the mink disappears. Back at the shelter, he finds the mouse toy made for his son and the stockpiled minced meat cakes all gone, likely the work of the mink he just saw. Day 50 arrived quickly. Heavy snow once again swept over Reindeer Island. Looking at the dreamlike snowscape, White shouted excitedly. Happy as he was, he did not want to freeze like a dog at night again, so he decided to collect some firewood. He had already stored plenty of food, and as long as he kept warm and avoided accidents, he could stay indoors without foraging and outlast the other contestants. In contrast, Alan became restless. Seeing that the lake was not frozen, he ran to the lakeside and started fishing. However, as the temperature continued to drop, the fish moved further from the shore. After casting his line dozens of times without a bite, he didn't want to give up, but prolonged exposure to the cold wind made his limbs extremely stiff. Not wanting a repeat of yesterday's tragedy, he returned to camp empty-handed, warmed up, and cooked himself a fish soup. At this stage of the challenge, plants had already withered and berries were buried deep. Proteins had also hidden away for the winter, making it very hard to find food. As night fell, White returned to the shelter, which was on fire. Fortunately, he reacted quickly, scrambled up, and extinguished the flames with a pot of water. Back inside, he dared not be careless, carefully checking if any embers remained on his clothes. After the commotion, White couldn't sleep, so he sat by the fire until daylight. He went outside to check the cause of the fire, which turned out to be the moss used to fill gaps. He removed all the dry moss, brought in a lot of stones, and rebuilt the structure to prevent another tragedy. Meanwhile, Mickey sang a birthday song early in the morning to send blessings to his 5-year-old son far away. Although he had made many gifts during this time, not being with his son on his birthday still pained his heart deeply. He immediately picked up his equipment, went outside to look for protein, and focused solely on hunting for food. White's days were quite comfortable. Although the shelter's fire startled him into a cold sweat, he inadvertently developed new cooking skills. However, located within the Arctic Circle, if there wasn't enough firewood for heating, seeing the heavy snow and biting cold outside, Alan chose to stay indoors to minimize energy consumption. Even though his food supplies were dwindling, his determination to win never wavered, as long as the producers didn't force him out, vowing to outlast others for over 100 days. By day 54, the snow had finally stopped. White stepped out of the camp looking towards Reindeer Lake, and seeing that the lake wasn't entirely frozen, he geared up to explore, hoping to find grouse or moose for a change in diet, dreaming of a moose steak. But the area was truly barren, and he didn't encounter even a trace of protein. Seeing the ice-encased fishing nets cooled his heart further. Yet, he didn't give up, cautiously stepping onto the icy rocks, nearly falling into the lake. After a fierce struggle and hopeful fishing, he caught nothing. By day 55, Alan was collecting firewood by the lake while checking the ice's thickness, estimating a few more days before he could ice fish. He started making ice-breaking shoes early due to prolonged malnutrition, feeling exhausted inside and out. The branches alone tired him, forcing him to stop often. It took him a whole day to finish, nearly freezing outdoors. Meanwhile, Mickey hadn't left the camp in days. Suddenly, the sound of beeping indicated a message from the producers for a medical checkup. Due to a long period without sufficient calories, his body was on the brink of collapse. Even dressing was difficult. When the crew arrived en masse at the camp, Mickey was already waiting outside, shivering. They had to return indoors for a checkup. To the medical team's surprise, his toes had already lost sensation, risking permanent damage. While the staff discussed options, Mickey, already in tears indoors, decided to leave on his own terms, which looked better than being forced to quit. By day 57, Alan, who had been rationing his food, felt dizzy and blurred vision due to hunger. He knew he couldn't last much longer without an energy boost. Ice fishing was his only hope. Putting on the snowshoes he had made earlier, he shakily made his way to the center of the lake, chopped a hole in the ice with an axe, and gathered a large amount of moss. He was ready to start fishing immediately. On day 58, after a failed ice fishing attempt, White took out an abandoned gill net. He planned to repair it and use it again in the lake so he wouldn't have to stand on the ice in the cold wind. With the ice ladder and gill net, he returned to the usual spot, chopped a rectangular hole in the ice, used logs as anchors, and lowered the gill net under the ice. In the blink of an eye, the automatic fishing device was set up. Then he went back to camp, sat by the fire, and comfortably slurped fish soup. While roasting, his toenails fell off unexpectedly, but he felt no other discomfort. This minor injury was nothing to White, but what happened next almost ended in tragedy. The fierce fire spread quickly, frightening White. He threw all his fresh water on it to extinguish the flames. During this time, White killed a mouse for an extra meal, and a black bear nearly scared Alan to death outside his camp. In this cold, lonely, and hungry state, they endured until day 62. White wanted to fetch some water on day 62, but when he reached the lake, he saw that the ice layer had been destroyed by the overnight gale, damaging his gill net as well. Disheartened, he returned to camp and chewed on boiled fish slices, venting his frustration. By day 64, as the first rays of the new day's sun appeared, White had an epiphany. With a loving wife, sensible children, and a job that could support his family, he wondered why he was enduring hardship in this forsaken place. He immediately made a phone call. As the crew arrived at the camp, White officially ended his challenge. After White's departure, only Alan remained. If he passed the medical check, he would be the winner. The crew discreetly issued a notice, and Alan conducted a self-check. Regardless of the outcome, he was ready. As the helicopter landed, the medical checks began. Although he had lost a significant amount of weight, his bodily functions were normal. At that moment, someone walked up from behind. It was then that Alan realized he had won. Not only would he take home the $500,000 prize, but he also added a remarkable achievement to his experiences. Later, he brought his wife to visit the camp and shared his experiences.